Fiona. Okay. Hi, Fiona. We've just started recording. I'll let Fiona do that. So just for the benefit of the recording, this is a meeting of the ISCET survey working group to discuss the progression of, to discuss progress with the manuscript that we're drafting. And the idea of the manuscript is to report the findings of the survey that we conducted into eye tracking. So we've got Rasha, Onyeka, Fiona and Matt on the call, as well as myself. We kind of all know each other, Daniel, but you're new to the group. So please do introduce yourself, but welcome. We're really grateful that you've taken the time to kind of join in and contribute to the manuscript. So thank you.
So I'm Daniel Goldstone. I'm a medical student at the University of Bristol. And I was involved in a research project last year into eye tracking, and then with Denise Atan, and she has kind of said that if I wanted to continue to get involved, which I do, this would be a great way to continue kind of a follow on from that project and help you with the manuscript this year.
That's great, thank you. We appreciate you being volunteered to join us, so thank you very much. So if everyone's okay, we'll just kind of dive in and look straight away at the manuscript, unless there's anything anybody wants to raise first. No, that's fine. So just to check that we are all working on the same document, it looks like everybody's on it. And I think Matt's put the link in the chat to this one here. So this is kind of our latest version. We are kind of keeping track of kind of where we've got up to prior to each meeting. So we are keeping kind of backups. I appreciate when we're putting in suggestions and we resolve them, sometimes it's difficult to go back. So we are trying to keep track of things that have happened along the way. It looks like the most progress has been made on the introduction, because I can see that Matt and Fiona have done quite a lot of work on that, as well as I'm not quite sure who Anonymous is, but yeah, so there's quite a bit of work done on the introduction.
I think we're all anonymous.
Matt, sorry.
So I was saying, I think everyone on here is anonymous at the moment. I should say as well, the introduction has mostly been written by Fiona. A lot of this has come from her. All I've done really is a little bit of redrafting at this stage of that. So credit to her.
Great. So thank you for that. Maybe Fiona, then, do you want to talk us through if there's any kind of things that need resolving or deciding? Do you want to kind of take us through where we're up to with the introduction?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't realize my mic was muted as soon as I joined. I was saying hello. I didn't mean to have a big pregnant pause there. Yeah, so I just had to go. I didn't really have a whole lot to kind of go on other than a review would be welcome. So I've given quite a broad scoping review of where eye tracking is being used clinically, and of existing standards and guidelines or papers that could, be considered proxy for guidelines. So, I mean, I just went for a kind of typical structure of like general to specific, and left some space at the end to maybe add some targeted research questions, because I had offered to look at the data as well and work on that. But I think it would be important for all of us to agree kind of targeted testable hypotheses to move forward with that. And I've left some notes there to see if maybe some research questions I've proposed might be useful. I don't want to really forge ahead with that without consensus. So I think that, everyone is, obviously, it would be very, very welcome from my side if everyone would critically comment. We're all coming from different backgrounds, and I'm very much on the research side, although I've also worked in clinical contexts and on clinical measures as well. But I think, you know, that's possibly better done with notes when people have the time to read through. And maybe a productive point of discussion would be to actually have a look at those research questions and see if we can make some steps towards concretizing them. And if we can do that, then it's going to make the job of writing up results and also methods insofar as the analysis goes in the next step, I think. Or what do people think?
I agree that, you know, getting the research questions is the first thing. We do have, thankfully, I see that Gemma has put a list of the, as they were on the survey purpose. But having got that, then we can see how we structure the results, and then that allows us to go from there. So I completely agree. And I see you've kind of taken that list, Fiona, and turned it into a set of questions. I'm just reading through this now, but for the benefit of everyone else, I'll copy them into here, actually.
Yeah, sure. This was just like my first sort of run at it, just to have something on a page rather than nothing to discuss.
Maybe it's easier if we actually look at the document itself. Can everybody see, if you jump to the very last sentence in the introduction, and there's a piece of text there. If you click on that, there's a comment. The second one on that, Gemma says, from the survey text. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, so we're on page 9.
Yes. Yeah.
I think, you know, we don't want to be making up questions retrospectively that were not the original one, but there can be, you know, there might maybe insights that we get from this that we hadn't expected. I think we aren't, given the sample size, likely to be able to look at regional differences, which I think was one of the things we originally talked about, you know, in how it's done. But we can look at the general picture across the whole world.
I think we can maybe look at specializations instead. But like I say, I've just done a run of trying to turn what was in the questionnaire in the text that Gemma copied here into sort of more testable research questions that would kind of make the data analysis clearer. But it could be an approach to just put in as many as possible now and then narrow them down. I just wrote this quickly today before we met. So it would be good to get feedback. So the questions that I've put in here are really trying to flesh out that first point. The purpose of the survey is to characterize current clinical use of eye trackers. So it's just trying to concretize that into sort of questions we can answer through analysis of the data.
I think I'd probably add one point to that, which is whether or not there's a desire for guidelines to be developed. I mean, I know ISCET's been for a while chatting amongst ourselves about whether there's a need for guidelines, but that hasn't gone wider than ISCET. So I think this is a nice thing if we can capture that in the results as well, you know, if there is a desire or a need for guidelines.
Yeah, so essentially, Fiona, I think what is listed there is pretty much kind of where we started with in kind of our original discussions when we were trying to hear everybody's kind of voices about what they wanted to know. That was kind of the reason for the survey, because we were kind of going a little bit round the houses, you know, with where to start with guidelines. So I do agree that that is essentially what people wanted to know. You know, what are people doing? What are they using? Are they just recording or are they interpreting? And how are they analysing data? And if they're doing these things, or even if they're not, what guidelines are they following? So are there existing guidelines, yes or no? And if they exist, are they helpful? So I think what's there is good. The only thing I would add is there's been kind of a feeling from the beginning that we should kind of characterize the lack of data or the lack of responses as well. So even if we don't have sufficient data to answer some of these questions, I don't think that means we should take the question out. I would just say these are questions that remain and we don't yet have information to be able to answer them, because in the future, it may be that these kind of questions are revisited and updated, and maybe kind of later down the line, these can be answered, or maybe it's just that we have to take a different approach to gather the information to answer a certain question. So
Sure,
yeah,
that
so I
makes
wouldn't feel that we have to take questions out. Sorry, Anya, can you dive in?
Yeah. Oh no, I was just agreeing with what you were saying. It's good to list out all the questions we want to know and then categorically state the ones that have been answered and future studies, what we need to do in the future. Yeah, so I was just agreeing totally.
Yeah, sure. I think like normally you state your research questions anyway, and then even if you have, for whatever reason, data loss or something in a study, then you would state we can't answer that question with this data. But I think also, doing, a somewhat comprehensive lit review also helps set the stage for that in terms of what is out there. Because if we come across guidelines that do exist, but nobody's using, that's also relevant to report, I feel like. But I think if it could be that some of the questions there are not the intention. I'm kind of extrapolating, freewheeling through. But for those that we do want to answer, then it could also be good just to take note of which questions of the questionnaire relate to each of these, so that we know exactly which data to look at to answer them. I think that would be pretty much everything that we would need then to go ahead and run analysis. Or what do people think?
I think so. I mean, the only thing I'm just kind of adding here is we had questions about who is doing what. So, and that's kind of where some of the clinical questions were trying to find out which kind of clinical groups are doing what. So I think that's the only other thing I'm adding. Okay. Because we had a suspicion that there may be different people doing different parts of the process, that actually might have some people doing the eye tracking, but ultimately kind of handing things on to other people to potentially analyse or interpret, because that would affect kind of the guidelines as well.
Right. That's what I was trying to get at with this. What is the provenance of the data recorded in clinical contexts? Just to give a kind of a broad overview so that you could look at, from the moment it's recorded, who is getting that data, who are they passing it on to, and so on. And that might be covered by several questions in the questionnaire, but could come under an umbrella of provenance of the data just for the purposes of structuring the results section.
Yeah. Are people kind of happy with those that are suggested? I mean, I guess from here, Fiona, I would probably put them into the text of the manuscript and kind of, as you've said, like invite comments on those.
Sure, I just didn't want to do it before some discussion, No,
I think what's suggested there is a really great start, and then we can. I'm just reading your comment about C1.
But I do think that it would be very helpful for me, for example, if I was to, go into the data now, just to have for ourselves like a little table of questions with which questions or which variables in the data set pertain to each question.
Great.
If that's useful.
Where is, I haven't actually seen the data table itself. Is that another document that we are able, because that would be where perhaps we could make this, this matching between the questions and the relevant variables.
Do you mean the raw data?
The raw data table, yeah.
So there should be, let me just give you a little link.
It was in the folder, I remember.
It was, let me just give you a little link
Looking
to
at the
that.
folder as such.
Unfortunately, it doesn't get spat out in a very kind of neat way, because depending on their answers to certain questions, other questions popped up. So it does kind of spit it out in quite a lengthy scroll across the screen.
It would probably be a lot easier to manage the data if we were to try and turn some of this into numerical representation as well, right?
As in like yeses and nos, or do you mean like numbers of responses?
Well, just if we have, I mean, it depends on how you typically, or what tools you want to use to analyze, but typically going to numeric rather than string data, you know, would make analysis a lot more straightforward. Sorry, go ahead.
The questions like question 9, which are approximately how often do you perform eye movement assessments? And of course, yeah, you're right. We've got a bunch of different strings at the moment. Some people use percentages, sometimes, you know, times per year. So maybe we need like a duplicate of each of those columns where we can have our interpretation of that as a classifier without destroying the raw data, but, you know, just so to do what you're suggesting, Fiona.
Yeah, exactly. Then it makes it very straightforward to plot or run statistical analysis where appropriate.
Yeah, so that's kind of described descriptively at the minute as just a paragraph, but it was a bit of a mess.
It's never a popular task to turn you know, qualitative into quantitative format.
Yeah,
but it does really make things much more straightforward, and we would need to do it if we want to run any kind of statistical analysis anyway.
I'm happy to put my hand up to volunteer to do that. I can go through the questions. I'll duplicate each of them, and then I'll put my interpretation, and then maybe if one other person just checks what I've done afterwards to see if they agree.
I'm also happy to, I feel as a student, I'm also happy to give that sort of thing a go.
I think
Thank
you're
you.
a fantastic heroic effort, and I'd also be very happy to you know, cast an eye over and just you know, maybe run some plots and analysis where it seems useful.
I can continue describing the data in words, anyone that needs to be described. But for the statistical analysis, I will just check what you guys have done later on.
Okay. So that
Yeah.
allows us then to translate from the questions to, you know, starting to actually get a results section together then.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important that what we have in here is an exact replica of the categories that were available in any kind of multiple choice questions as well. So if we had like 5 multiple choices you could choose from, for example, in the how often kind of questions, we just number them 1 to 5 in those categories, and keep a key that says what each category is in text form.
So we have got some of that in terms of the survey. We kind of don't have to, I guess, repeat some of that. Some of it will be available in kind of the original file.
Sure, we just need to turn the table into numbers rather than text.
Could I ask what might be a silly question, which is that the results are color coded or colored. Is there any meaning to the colors?
Yeah, that's my my brain. So the green is all the people that have responded, perform clinical eye tracking and interpret. The blue is everybody who's I perform clinical eye tracking but don't interpret. The orange, so they're kind of coded by their initial response to the first question.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
That's fine. Yeah. So we're not anything. There's no additional data there. That's just that.
Yeah, that was just kind of, so from the raw data tab where everything was just a little bit everywhere.
Yeah,
that was just trying to organize it by that initial response, because how they responded initially then determined which questions they were asked.
got it. So shall I take the first pass through this? I will, every question that can be categorized into numerical cutoffs or something like that, I will do my best to put those in reasonable categories. Obviously, some of them had predetermined categories. Those are easy because it's just the coding of those in an ordinal sense. But the ones that were slightly more open-ended, we'll need to create categories for. But I'll do my best for that.
Exactly. I was just thinking categorical information where you have multiple choice. And then maybe I was wondering if we could also look at where there's a free text response. We could do some, there are tools for analyzing frequency of terms and things like that, that we could consider there as well. I don't know if that's anything that anyone has done before, or recoding free text into numerical data.
I don't think I have in that way. I guess my concern is that we might not have lots of responses to be able to do that, but I'd be interested in whether it kind of generates something useful, because if we don't try, we don't know.
There's always a word cloud. Those are actually quite a nice way of representing if you have,
I thought of that.
There a question. Go on, so.
Yeah, I was also thinking a word cloud, could be one kind of basic way to do it if there's not a lot of data. But for some questions, like, I don't know, where, for example, and this may not exist, I can't remember, I did read through, but it's been a while, like maybe there's a question where we talk about a free text answer where we talk about the measures that are taken, or a free text answer where we talk about diseases. Then you could look at the frequency of terms. And sometimes you might need to recode a little bit, like where two different people use a different term for the same disease, for example. But it's possible that some questions might actually have enough data for that. I'm not sure. Gemma, you probably have the best overview because you've been looking at this closest.
Yeah, I think it would be worth kind of giving it a go, because I can't really say straight off the bat, like, yes, let's do it. No, let's not, because I feel like it's probably just worth exploring it in that way to find out if that's going to be helpful. I think certainly within each group, you might find there's kind of similarities and overlap. I think it's not a concern. I think if we've got that kind of recoding where we think a couple of people are essentially saying something similar, but they're using different words, there's probably just, we need some agreement between a couple of people that is the understanding of those words. Otherwise, I would be worried that as an orthoptist, I might change things to mean a certain thing, whereas others might kind of approach that differently. So I would just be happier if if we were doing that there was a little bit of agreement for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there isn't necessarily one right way to do it either. I think the important thing is that we make sure the methods are described in a replicable way, so once we explain what we've done and the criteria we've used, we can't really go too wrong. But okay, some of the questions, like where do you have any concerns, these kind of questions, it's hard to imagine another way to approach analyzing them, at least for me.
I was thinking of a situation where we may need to bring out quotes, because, for example, question 12, where it says, do you have any concerns? You have a lot of responses. Some of them are not even similar at all. So we may just need to bring out like some sample answers and put them in the text as part of the results rather than grouping them together if we don't find a similar theme with the responses that participants have given. So it may end up being that way, depends on what we have found in the responses. So they're quite varied, what I see here. If we use question 12.1 as an example, lots of different answers given.
Yeah, but I can imagine they're maybe coding together absence of standardized tests along with standardized practices are missing, you know,
okay.
that kind of thing, just because otherwise I don't know how we would report this. We're not going to presumably list all of the responses as the results. So we have to think of some way to collate these responses in a kind of sensible way.
Yeah, it could be a case of an example of a standardized text, an example of a response given for a standardized method, just a quote, something like that. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Or you could say such and such a percentage of responses mentioned standardized practices or guidelines as an issue.
Yeah.
But I think anyway, whatever way we approach that, some way of recoding these free text answers is needed to collate them in any way.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and what obviously as you kind of scroll across the spreadsheet, if they've answered that same question but with a slightly different twist because they've had it as a professional body answer, that's kind of repeated as a question and a response later on. So I think that the suggestion to kind of bring it all together is probably going to be helpful now, because as Fiona says, we need to kind of turn this into something that brings it together. And I just think if there's that, I guess what Fiona's suggesting is we need to try and kind of bring these under very similar kind of meanings as much as possible, don't we? We need to kind of change it from a string of quotes to
themes.
There is similarity, there are themes, yeah. Great.
Yeah, to describe the overall shape of the responses. But there are a number of ways to go at that. You can go at it kind of top down, if you like, and, you know, if there's not that much data, it's not a huge job to go top down and sort of divide it up into, you know, maybe there's like 6 different issues that are brought up here, and we can say how many people have raised each one. But the other thing I was suggesting, where you do a more systematic text analysis, is more bottom up, where the text itself and the frequency of different terms suggest which categories and how many you should have based on the responses. But that typically is going to work where you have like a reasonable amount of text data to actually run such an analysis on.
Yeah. I think the first way described, kind of top down, would probably be the best way to do that, because I feel like we did give people options, and then we always kind of gave them this free text option to kind of add detail. So I think going top down first is probably the best way. Matt's nodding.
Yeah, I agree.
Fred, welcome. I see you've joined. I think Matt's also put the link in the chat for you about the document you're using, but just to say hi and welcome. Okay, so in that shared folder, I've also put the link to the final survey wording, Fiona, so that might help with the kind of understanding of the different options they had as well. Are you and Matt happy to make a start on that?
Well, I think Daniel was volunteering for that.
Great.
But and I think someone has to just have a first pass. It's like at that very first stage, it's sort of a one-person job. I would think it just becomes actually a bigger job if you try and have several people. And then, you know, when there are suggested categories, then maybe myself and Matt could come in and we can discuss them.
Sounds reasonable.
Daniel, I didn't want to volunteer you, but that was what I understood you were suggesting.
Yeah. I'll try and kind of make some categories and then number them and see how well it fits of the questions. And well, hopefully it will go well. And if it doesn't, well, I won't make any categories, but I'm sure I'll try my best. I'm sure I'll be able to make some good progress.
Well,
and then someone else can kind of see what I've done and see if there's any kind of improvements to be made.
Sure. And if it was useful, I'd be happy to kind of hop on a call and maybe go through one question just as a sort of first basic approach that we could do together. If that's useful, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, probably. I think that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify then, so Daniel will come up with the initial set of questions with Fiona's guidance, or categories rather, and then perhaps myself and Fiona will go through and categorize them, and maybe we should look for where maybe we should do it independently and then look at where there was discrepancies, and maybe we could discuss resolving those. What do you reckon? Or maybe it would be better, Fiona, shall I just go through them and then you just check what I've done rather than you having to do the whole exercise yourself as well?
Well, I think the first thing is to suggest which variables there will be, like say taking this 12.1 text as an example again. You know, obviously the example I used was standardized practices or guidelines, lack of guidelines, whatever, that they could probably be recoded as a single variable. And then if we have those list of variables, then we could look through the text independently and see it. But I think it you know, maybe for Daniel, it could be useful to focus on one variable first, and then when you've got sort of a sense of how to approach the other questions, then we could separate out and do it independently. Or what do you think? It really depends on you, Daniel, if you've done this kind of thing before.
Not specifically this kind of thing, to be honest.
Okay. But does it make sense what I'm saying, that first we would find the variables and then look through the text to see if we agree with how it's been recoded?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
So just to clarify, the process is that Daniel, with your guidance, Fiona, would come up with the list of variables. I then go through and try and code them as best I can, and then it could be you, Fiona, or somebody else could then check what I've done and see whether they agree, and we can resolve any discrepancies.
Sounds good.
Yep. Okay, good.
Checking, and I'm just kind of writing this down, Matt. Okay.
And then the other thing which we've spoken about, we haven't yet worked out how it will happen, is deciding which of those questions, which of the questions set from the survey will be used to answer the research questions, which I think we've now got a list of. Whether they all end up becoming analysed or not is another matter, but and then that allows us then to begin the results section.
Yeah, just to point towards like even just taking these column names or something, just which questions pertain to which research, you know, which survey questions pertain to which research questions.
Yeah, that sounds clear. Good.
Shall I do that? Is that all right?
Yeah.
So if I have a go at that, I just feel like, because I feel like I'm probably halfway there from what's been done before.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
So after all that's done, it's a case of drafting the results section. And then when we've got a draft results section, I'll then make a first draft of the discussion section.
Yeah, and I guess a step before that would be to decide what to answer just qualitatively based on just reporting distributions, and what maybe to analyze, whether chi-squared or depending on what the variables are, and then which analysis to run. And I'm happy to run analysis if we do some.
Okay. Okay. Is everybody happy with that approach? I'm just, if I kind of come up with that first, I would appreciate somebody kind of having a bit of a look to check all of that before, because I guess if there's disagreement with that structure or some discussion to be had, I think that would be quite useful to know earlier on. Is that okay?
I don't mind checking. Do you want me to check before you check, or I check alongside as you're checking too?
Should I have a go with it on Yaker and then
Okay.
kind of let you know when I've done it? Would that be all right?
Yeah. Okay.
And is that assuming that the research questions that we've listed are the ones we're going to go with?
I think so.
Should we maybe send it out to a list of questions out to the larger group just briefly with like a short deadline in case they want to add anything? Or you think it's comprehensive enough?
I wonder if we put those together, send around the kind of like a brief summary of what we've done today, ask them to comment on that or add anything, and give them the date of the next working group, and just say, if there's any changes to this, please let us know before this date.
I could put a post on the front page of the website to say that that's available on there, and maybe something on the forum as well. I feel like putting a request out to the entire group might be, because we've kind of been trusted with this process of the manuscript as a group, and I'm not sure that, I don't know, it seems quite a low threshold thing to be sending out to the entire.
I meant to the survey working group, I think.
Yeah,
Sorry,
group.
Rather than
Okay, yeah.
whole kit and caboodle.
It just meant those who have been in meetings about the paper. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just to say, we've met, this is what we've done, these have been formulated, please review these to see if there's any changes that you think should be made. This is the date of the next kind of meeting. We have a draft of the introduction, please review that and comment on it. We're now moving on to the results, but the results will follow these questions unless you make any changes. Daniel, do you want to come in on that? Rasha's got a thumbs up. Thanks, Rasha.
Sorry, it cut out for a second. Could you just repeat it? Repeat the question.
Yeah, so we were just kind of, I guess, wanting a way of double checking that people were happy with the research questions. And the suggestion was to circulate just to the survey working group a kind of brief summary of what we've done today, and asking people to comment on the introduction, but to then check the proposed research questions, but to give them quite a short deadline to comment on that if needed, because the results is going to follow that structure. Go for it, Matt.
Just to suggest, if you could put it as a question on the forum and then send people an email to make the comments there, because we're trying to keep, ideally, everything ISCET does is transparent. And I do understand that email is an awful lot more convenient. But with things like that, where the critical points, if we just put it, there is a sub forum on the forum for the survey group. So sorry, I know it's procedural and complicated, but it's just, I think transparency is really important for this. So put the question on the forum and then email the group, send them a link to the forum. Complicated as it might be, it means it's all transparent then.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that. I mean, I do get the point that in, X years' time, when it was like, well, where did that come from? At least then there's a trail.
Maybe I'm overthinking it too much, but not every email has to go on the forum.
Well, I mean, another aspect is, like, it would be a lot more straightforward if we were using something that has proper, records of the document edits as well. And so that if comments come in on the introduction, for example, that I know who they're coming from, and you know, can initiate discussion or.
This is, as a general point, is to do with the fact that at the moment ISCET is it's not got a lot of funding. So at some point in the future there will be a kind of paid ISCET thing, but at the moment, you know, ISCET's still growing as a society. The model we've been following is ISCET, and they use something called Wild Apricot, and that is a much more integrated system for being able to communicate with all the members of the group, having subgroups, having document. I think it has a system like you're referring to, like a proper version control for shared documents and so on. So it's a one day we will be able to do this in a much better way, but at the moment with little funding, we've got to use the Google tools and so on.
Well, there's a lot of free tools that have proper provenance and version control too. I know that LaTeX is not always very popular, but it does have at least, you know, unlimited version control. Okay. But I've, you know, for ISO or CIE standardization, which I've used before, they do have internal systems, and I don't know if, you know, because they're professional standardizing bodies, they just kind of provide it, but I don't know if this work is, you know, attached to a professional standardizing body, or if there's scope for looking at that. But from my point of view, even something like anything that has version control would be really good, especially when comments are turning up anonymous sometimes, and you know, you don't know who said it or how to follow up.
I agree. I think if anyone has any suggestions for, you know, more robust systems that we could be using generally, it's a good lesson for ISCET generally. I mean, ISCET is now just about to start defining its very first actual standard, and I think in that case it's really important that, you know, that every part of the discussion is retained. Perhaps slightly less important for this manuscript, but I think, you know, we need to have those systems in place, and so any suggestions are very welcome.
Yeah, that's a side topic. I know we went like a little bit, but that, I think that's very important, and maybe Fiona, if you have certain suggestions, I would be happy, me and Matt, to take it, and I would put that in the next agenda. What do you think? Because apparently you have very good, all of us might have some suggestions, and we're the more this is easier for all of us, the better. So we're still working on it. So I think I'll put that in the next agenda.
Yeah, I mean, it could Perfect. Be just maybe survey people on whether or not they would be willing to move to LaTeX, simply because it's free and you have all the tools you need there. But I do understand that people are not always very comfortable with LaTeX, but you know, with Overleaf and everything compiling in the browser now, and you know, you don't have to download any software or anything. So they've gone quite some ways since the old LaTeX days in making it very user friendly, and you don't actually need to do any coding at all anymore. So,
yeah, but does it really support such a website? Because that's new to know. I'll dig into that. And
yeah, Overleaf is just a web-based compiler for LaTeX, and it's free, and it's been designed by academics, and it has full version control and so on. And it also has chat functions and all that sort of stuff as well.
Rasha, I believe that was the system that was used for those two conferences that you
exactly. Yeah, I use it for like drafting papers and stuff, but I haven't been thinking that it can act as substitute to our website.
I'm not sure which website you mean. Do you? I'm really just talking
because we were speaking about the forum. Have we been speaking about the forum itself, or we are speaking about the writing now to transfer it from Google Doc to Overleaf?
Oh, well, it's just in terms of version control and people commenting and people who's written what and all that sort of stuff. You get all that in LaTeX. So
I agree.
And then there's a formal record also. So, you know, for standardization, if it ever was to go to a professional standardizing body, they do require that. And you would get what you need from something like Overleaf. But maybe other things too. As I said, when I've worked with the ISO or CIE, they provide a whole platform for all the work, because you have to have all of this provenance and data control to demonstrate consensus. But failing that right now, pretty much anything would be better than Google Docs, I think.
I totally agree. I totally agree on that.
Fred has pointed out on the chat that we could force people to log into Google. That would at least make sure that I'm wondering if I'm actually, yeah, I am logged in actually. That would at least make sure that we had some provenance in the current process. I think this is useful maybe going forward, and I can recommend it to the chairs of the Nystagmus guideline group.
Yeah, if you're logged into Google, then it does keep note of who's leaving comments, but it doesn't keep record of who has written it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. That's without thought for me. I'm sorry. I couldn't because we have been speaking first about that we need to post on the forum, and that the forum gives. I mean, there were two topics in my head. So, but the overlay for me comes without like it's perfect. Maybe we would place some links for people who are not used to it, and it's not hard as you said. Like it just, you freak out in the beginning because it's a new thing, but then it's as even Fred mentioned in the comments, and there are many reasons to avoid Google. I totally agree with that.
So I would like to propose that we consider that I'll put this forward for the upcoming kind of ISET efforts, but for the current project, I would suggest that it might not be worth at this point jumping platforms right now. That's my suggestion anyway, that this is useful for future.
Yeah, I guess there's probably a couple of things, isn't there? There's the manuscript, and let's probably just stay as we are for now. It was done in Google because that's where all the original kind of research stuff had to be kept from an ethics point of view for the University of Sheffield. But I think the guidelines, they're probably a separate thing.
Yeah.
Apologies for everyone who hates Google. My university, that's what they use. Love it or hate it, debate it till the cows come home. But maybe we'll just keep this as it is for now, but then future kind of guidelines can be discussed where they're best created, developed, tracked. Fiona?
Yeah, so having written the introduction and compiled the 74 references, I would have a slightly different feeling about it, because, you know, for example, Matt suggested one reference, and now it's in the first paragraph as reference number 75. And that requires going through the entire thing by hand and changing all the reference numbers. And that's not a fantastic use of anyone's time, where if it was in LaTeX, then we wouldn't have to deal with this whatsoever. So, you know, I thought about leaving a comment, if adding a reference, please renumber the references, but I don't think that anyone is going to want to do that job. I've already done it a couple of times, and I'm not sure if all those references will stay in. In fact, when I saw the new reference, my immediate thought was, what can I delete to make this have to mean going through 74 references and renumbering them again? So, you know, just to bear in mind that those kind of tasks take an unbelievably long time that could be spent on analysis or more productive tasks, and we all have limited time to spend on it.
So I would suggest that for the time being, you just add them in as they come up, and then we will do that as a very last task at the end. I mean, we're not going to be. I think we've already discussed that we weren't going to produce this document in Google Docs anyway at some point, and maybe we're nearly at that point now. It was going to be jumping to, I think we discussed Word, but I have no issue with LaTeX either. At which point we can use a proper citation manager, and then it will all be resolved. But for the time being, I don't think we need to be renumbering them every time something's added. Let's just do it once at the end.
And I'm also fine with Word if we used it through Teams or something where there is provenance and Word. I mean, I'm not a big fan, but at least we have some tools for referencing with Word as well. But you know, don't underestimate what a giant pain in the backside going and doing manual references are. it's really takes hours and hours.
Like I have a suggestion. I think we did it also with the last paper that we submitted to ETRA, that the new, due to the like we had already also overleaf. So the last versions were transferred, or not the very last, but like before that. And then we submitted like this way. So it does really help in the referencing. So when do we want to do that, and how we I mean, but we have done that. We initially started with Google Doc, and then we transferred at least for the referencing, and also the final document. It did save a lot of time. Someone was in charge of that. And
Yeah, and Google Docs also exports horrific formatting as for
Yeah,
PDF. So
but-
it's going to need to be transferred for submission at some point.
But my suggestion, for the ease of everyone, that this would be near the end, maybe, because like I don't think that people editing, all the authors, I mean, would be comfortable. We need first to check that, and it's quite that's my intuition, that I don't think that everyone would. It will take like a learning curve for everyone to. It will delay even the other authors from contributing, which us actually we want to encourage them. So we can not worry maybe about the final version. Maybe use suggesting to use the author and date even for now in this version, and then pre-final we can do that if we agree to it. And then maybe it's very good, Matt, that the next hour, if we're starting the next tag, was that we were started like clean enough on overleaf.
I agree.
Fred, do you want to jump in?
I think Matt was first.
Oh, what I was going to suggest was there was a time to do it, but I agree with Rush. I mean, near the end, maybe the time to do it is when we've got the first draft of at least introduction, methods, and results. I mean, I'm going to be doing the first draft of the discussion. I don't mind whether the document's converted before or after that. From my point of view, I could do either. So, don't mind. But yeah, I agree. Let's get the bulk of it down in Google Docs, and then we'll shift to something which helps with referencing.
I was just going to say that there is a Zotero Google integration, but typically it doesn't work very well, and it's kind of unstable with like multiple authors. Kind of breaks down. At least in the past, enough that I stopped using it. But that would be one option, is to use something that integrates with Google. The second is that if you want to jump into a Word document, a shared Word document, I would recommend that you do not do it from an institutional web. Like your institutional page, just create a personal one and share that one, because otherwise the logging in is just miserable, and it's like very, very difficult to collaborate. For any of these, I would say references at the very end. Yeah, absolutely. Just enough to disambiguate them right now, and then otherwise leave it for later.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So we're kind of almost at 3 UK time. I appreciate you're not all on that. Is everybody happy with where we're up to? So I'm going to kind of put those research questions together, get on Yaker to check them, and then we will cross-check that with how they're going to be answered by each of the questions. Message on the forum to kind of summarize where we're up to and ask people to look at those and to start kind of critically commenting on the other bits and pieces. Matt and Fiona, Daniel's going to have a kind of a first pass at all of the results in the spreadsheet, and to start characterizing and kind of coding some of that, starting with one question, and then Fiona and Matt are going to kind of communicate with Daniel about that, double check all of that before that progresses. Is that about where we're up to? And we're going to endure the pain of Google Docs for a little bit longer, but we will move to another format, particularly when we need to sort referencing. We're going to do that at the end. Is there anything I've missed?
No.
No. Okay. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for joining the club.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'll try and circulate the next kind of suggested meeting time with all of that kind of summary as well.
Right.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
if
Gemma.
any other feedback on the introduction, I'll take it in any way, shape, or form. And also, just as a final thing, I'm happy to volunteer to move it to Overleaf. I can do that. It's quite quick.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.